Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I want to talk about an aspect that somebody kept asking me, maybe it's more than one person, that they wanted to see a video on. And it is actually called the quincunx aspect, which I have always used in astrology, even when, well, of course, when I did Western astrology, that's where I learned about it. And then come to find out that it is actually an aspect used in Vedic astrology. Of course, aspects are nothing but the spatial portions or degrees between planets. And when certain planets get in these spatial relationships to each other, they trigger events. So the easy way that I look at the aspects is simply by counting from sign to sign in the charts. So I have a pretty good example. Well, actually, I think it's an excellent example of some major quincunx and another thing that's called the yod. And the yod is called the finger of God. And the reason why I'm bringing that in, because the yod involves two quincunxes at the same time. So before I get going and start telling you all the details about this fascinating subject, and I'm telling you, it is a trigger that makes things happen. You're going to want to know about this. So even if you're a novice and don't know a lot of astrology, I guarantee you're going to get something out of this. So before I continue on, I want to remind everyone, go to my website, galacticcenter.org. I have a wealth of information there. But most of all, sign up for my free newsletter where you will be getting all of my aspects, all of my transits, what I predict monthly, every week. So sign up for that. Go to galacticcenter.org. It's completely free. And then don't forget, I have a couple of other things going on that are fascinating. When you're at my website, check out my new magazine. Click on that, Joni Patry's Astrology Insights. We have amazing authors that have some of the most interesting articles. You will love it. It's monthly, only less than it's $9.99 a month. You will be incredibly entertained by it. So you can subscribe to that on my website. And also I have my beginning class, new semester 1, starting January 25th. Don't miss it if you want to learn this. It's a community of students, teachers that have all come together to learn this divine science of astrology. So let's get going and let's start talking about what in the world is a quincunx. And in Vedic astrology, it's actually called a Shastaka. And what that simply means, Shastaka means 8-6 relationship or 6-8 relationship. Those are just the words for numbers. So what is it when you're counting around two different planets, their spatial relationships to each other, which I call an aspect? It's simply the degrees between the planets. Remember, there's a 360-degree zodiac, and each sign is 30 degrees. So there's the conjunction, meaning it's in the same sign. There's the opposition. They're 180 degrees from each other. There's the squares, which are 90 degrees. But let me show you by an example what I'm talking about, the 6-8-8-6 relationship. So I want to put up a very interesting chart that proves my point incredibly. The chart of the Tiananmen Square massacre that happened, of course, in Tiananmen Square in China in 1989. Now, putting this chart up, what you're going to find is there are some amazing 6-8 relationships. Now, in Vedic astrology, it simply means, what does the 6th house mean and what does the 8th house mean? The 6th house can be the house of enemies and accidents and struggles. That's the 6th house. I know there's some other good things about it, but relative to what this aspect brings about, just remember it deals many times with accidents, with aggression, with problems. Now, what does the 8th house represent? It can represent death. And the 8th house is endings and difficulty. Actually, they say the 6th house is acute diseases, where the 8th house is chronic diseases. These are two difficult houses, and therefore their spatial relationships bring accidents and death many times, or fighting, disruption, discord. They are so incongruent when planets are placed 6 signs, houses away from each other, or 8. But here's the deal. If one planet sits six houses from the other one, then counting back around, always moving in forward direction in these charts, you're going to find that these planets will be placed 6 and 8. So looking at this, talking about, and it's called the quincunx. Actually, it's also called an inconjunct in Western astrology. It's just, you know, when you're playing the chords musically, or just, for example, on the piano, and you hit that chord that feels kind of off, and then you have to go to the next one to complete it. That's the inconjunct. It's off. It's causes problems. It causes like disruption. But of course, it is right before a healing. This disruption sometimes is essential to cause these problems, inconjunct problems, that the sixth house actually in Vedic astrology can deal with accidents and problems and enemies. But at the same time, it is the house that deals with healing. So this is what comes out of this. So it's not all terrible, but it's just this aspect of something not being right at all. So I want you to look at where Saturn sits in this chart. Sits there at 18 degrees of Sagittarius. Well, if you will count to where Jupiter is, where the moon is, where the sun is, there in Taurus, let's count in forward clockwise direction from the sign of Sagittarius where Saturn sits. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you see the sun, Jupiter, and even the natal moon on that day of the massacre, where so many people were in rebellion against the government in China. And they killed many people, but it was students that were protesting their rights. It's kind of coming up right now again. So I thought this was a very meaningful chart to display. So Saturn is in a quincunx to the sun, Jupiter, and moon in this chart. Now, if you will count back from where those planets sit in Taurus, counting the sign Taurus is number 1, count back to where Saturn is moving in clockwise direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you see that's the quincunx, 6, 8, or 8, 6. Okay? So the other planet that forms a quincunx to all of those planets in Taurus is Pluto. Now look at where Pluto is at 19 degrees of Libra. Now I want you to count to all the planets in Taurus. Count going clockwise, starting with Libra as 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you see that's another quincunx. And if you count back from Taurus to where Pluto is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Once again, this is a Shastaka or a quincunx, or if you want to call it inconjunct, whatever you want. It is 6 and 8 placements. Pluto to moon, Jupiter, and the sun. Exact, almost, and I have to say with Pluto and the Sun, they were exact. They were both 19 degrees. That is a Shastaka 6-8 quincunx. Now, here is another wonderful tool. When you have two planets that are in what is called in Western astrology is a sextile, which means they're 60 degrees apart. So if you count from one planet to the other planet, there'll be 3 signs apart. So if you go to where Pluto sits, 19 degrees of Libra, and you count to Saturn, 1, 2, 3, they are 3 signs away, which is a sextile. 60 degrees, in other words. So when you've got these two planets and they're in a tight sextile, because Saturn's 18, almost 19 degrees, and Pluto is 19 degrees, so less than a degree apart from exact sextile. But when you have two planets that are in sextile and you have a third planet that both those planets are forming a quincunx to, such as both Pluto and Saturn are directing a quincunx to the sign of Taurus, that's called the yod, and that's called the finger of God. So it's when you have two quincunxes to a particular planet, this means something is going to happen that changes life. Definitely. Accidents, enemies, fighting, and possible endings and death. But what is it? It's transformation. These people were fighting for their causes, for their rights, and they made their point, but many of them died in the process. So that is a beautiful example of what a yod looks like. That it is amazing change. Now, I found sometimes coming up, there's a couple of them, but one of the dates that really stuck out to me in the future where we have yods. And I just picked a day in the future. I looked at August. I'm going to put this chart up. August 24th, 2023. Around that time, we have where Pluto will be approximately around 4 degrees of Capricorn. And if you'll look where Neptune is, it is at 2 degrees of Pisces. So if you'll count from Pluto to Neptune, 1, 2, 3, they're in a sextile. And they stay in a sextile for quite some time. That means there's going to be more yods or quincunxes that create yods formed. So whenever a planet goes into the sign of Leo, we're going to have a yod. So looking at the sun being in Leo around, I just picked the day August 24th. It could be August, actually, I'm going to say August 20th, when the sun sits around 4 degrees or 2 degrees. Around the 18th to the 20th, the sun will be exactly in a quincunx to both Pluto and Neptune. Go ahead, do the count. Neptune to where the sun is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you count the sun all the way back to Neptune, you will arrive at 8. And if you count the sun to Pluto, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, once again, you have the quincunx. So that's something to consider. Now, there's also another yod occurring around this time. That's why I chose this date. That is when you're going to have Saturn and Jupiter sextile each other. Now, this is a wide orb, but it still counts. Saturn in Aquarius, counting to where Jupiter is in Aries. So count 1, 2, 3. Yes, that is a sextile between Saturn and Jupiter. And during that time, when we have Mars transiting the whole time in Virgo, which Mars will be in Virgo from August 18th till October 3rd. Of course, I'm talking about this time of 2023. Mars will be forming a quincunx to Saturn as well as to Jupiter. And that means there's trouble ahead during the month of August and most of all the end of August. And you know what? August, September, I have predicted before, I think there's another pandemic that may be lurking behind the scenes. Hopefully I'm completely wrong, but I'm thinking about Mars being in the sign of health and healing, Virgo. So I want everyone to strengthen their immune systems way before this date. Don't wait till it's upon you and then you're weak and then you contract and get sick with disease. Build your immune system before this date or this time, August, September, and the beginning of October of 2023. So that includes my little mini lesson on how to see a quincunx, which causes all sorts of discontent and inharmonious feelings. And when you have two of these quincunxes and the two planets that are forming the quincunx to the one planet are going to be very important. One more thing I might add. There is a planet that's called a trigger point, and it sits between the two planets that are in a sextile relationship. Now, in the chart of Tiananmen Square, we did not have a trigger point, but the trigger point in that chart is in Scorpio. But in the chart that I'm depicting from August to October, with Neptune and Pluto, when you look at those two planets, Saturn is the trigger point in between that sextile, and it opposes the sun on that day. So this finger of God is an intense one. Once again, I want everyone to take caution before, and you'll be glad you did. So with that, I'd like to close. Remember, if you want more information on me, you can always go to my website. Go to galacticcenter.org, sign up for my free newsletter, my magazine, and don't forget my start date, which is going to be January 25th, and my world predictions. I forgot to mention that. It's going to be December 17th. Go to my website. You'll see it all. galacticcenter.org. Thank you.